I was born in 1950 in Chicago. When I was 4 years old, my parents, they bought a plot of land and a house that they built for $2,000 down. And 30 years to pay $19,000. So they could afford it. It was in a place called Highland Park. And as a small child, some of my friends, their parents hated me and even said that God hated me. And I was totally condemned to hell because I was born in a Jewish family. When I heard this at 7 years old, it deeply hurt me. I couldn't rationalize or intellectually, philosophically sort it out. For adults, the parents of my friends to think of me this way, simply caused confusion and pain. What is this God that inspires so much hatred? That's what I was thinking. Because everyone was telling me that God is the God of love. But it just didn't seem that way. As I grew older and became a teenager, it was the 1960s. How many of you were around for that era? So you know how confusing and turbulent that time was. The Vietnam War was raging. There was a draft. When you turn 18, if you're called, even if you don't believe in the war at all, you either go to be killed or killed, to kill or be killed, or you go to jail. Those were your two choices. And some of my friends' older brothers, they were sent there against their will and killed, or they came back completely traumatized, psychological wrecks, drug addicts, or wounded for life. In Grant Park, during the Democratic conventions, there were people asking many questions. I went there, and I was tear-gassed and chased by club police who were beating brutally. By God's grace, I was a fast runner. And we were told that these were the people protecting our freedom. Didn't make sense. I had a job when I was 15 years old, and everyone, along with my friend Gary and myself, was from the south side of Chicago, African American. They were all my father's age. They were so beaten down by poverty, racial prejudice, and alcoholism to deal with it. I could see that they were prisoners of the ghetto and there was no hope or chance of any of these people getting out. And yet we were pledging allegiance to the flag, that all men are created equal. It didn't make sense. I joined the civil rights movement. And I was cursed at and stones, bottles, and tomatoes thrown at me when I was marching by my white brothers and sisters. In the counterculture, we grew our hair long, not as a fashion or a style, but as a statement of what we believed, that there has to be a change in this world. It's just not right. And it was passionate. I heard a statement that affected my heart very deeply. If you don't have an ideal, if you do not have an ideal that you are willing to die for, you really have nothing very important to live for. I wanted to find that ideal. But gradually I was seeing in the counterculture, which is infused with rock and roll musics, marijuana, LSD, free sex, demonstrations, anarchy, I saw so many of the same things that we were fighting against that we had. There really wasn't much of a difference. It was just a different fashion, a different cause. I heard the words of Gandhi. Be the change that you want to see in the world. Little by little, I came to the conclusion that if I actually want to be that change, it has to take place in myself on a spiritual level. And seeing so much persecution, hearing of so many dozens of my relatives being murdered by the Nazis in Germany, I really believed that there was an essence that was common in all the great religions of the world. And I felt a desperation to find it. When I was 19, my lifelong friend Gary, he called me up, invited me to Cherry Hill, New Jersey to meet him, and said, Frank and I are leaving for Europe in a few days for a summer vacation. We'll be back in time for college. You must come with us. I said, I have no money and I have a job this summer. I can't leave. He said, Frank is going to pay for both of us because I don't have any money either. I said, oh, if Frank pays, I'll go. So we went, $65, a flight from New York to Iceland. That's Europe, I guess. And then we got a connecting flight to Luxembourg. It was a propeller plane. Oh, we were so happy. It was the first time in any of our lives we were ever off the soils of America, in a foreign land. The first day, Frank showed us what kind of accommodations he was going to arrange for us. We stayed in a little tiny one-man tent. All three of us in a campground. For Gary and I, that was fine. We were free in a way. There was a whole ocean between ourselves and our parents. We could do anything we want. The first day, Frank got robbed. And he said, I'm going home. We can't make it without any money. And he left that same day. And Gary and I said, well, we've come this far. It's not about money. We're on a spiritual quest. So we had to really depend on a higher power. And it's a long story, but we decided that we would hitchhike. Do all of you know what hitchhiking is? I don't know if you do it these days, but you stand like this on the side of the road at the mercy of whatever driver comes by. And we decided whoever picks us up, wherever they're going, that is where God wants us to go. So, from Luxembourg, we were in Holland, Abcouda, and then Amsterdam, which was quite a scene in the 1960s. And then we were down to the Hook of Holland, across the English Channel. And then we ended up at the Isle of Wight Rock Festival, the biggest rock festival of the whole generation, with over 500,000 people and all the greatest bands. And they were playing and playing. And I remember Jimi Hendrix was playing his song, and it was blaring out of the speakers. And I was thinking that there's a calling in my heart that's louder than all this music, and it's silent, and it's calling me away from all this. But I didn't know exactly what it was. A few days after that festival, Jimi Hendrix died, just a few blocks from where I was staying, or a mile or so, near London. And I was thinking, he has incredible talent, fame, money, everything everybody could want. But overdosing? Was he satisfied? My hope in the counterculture died along with him. And I started spending almost all my time in cathedrals and monasteries and synagogues and in museums, trying to figure out life, trying to connect to myself. And it's a long story. But eventually Gary and I were living in a cave on a mountain in the Greek island of Crete on the southern coast. Oh, I've lived in a lot of caves since then. I would rate that as a 4-star cave. That was the beginning of my caveman lifestyle. But every day I would go to the top of a mountain and pray and meditate and read spiritual books from sunrise to sunset. And every day Gary would go down to the seashore to do the same. And then we would meet at the cave and discuss our experiences for the day. One day something overcame me. Practically the whole day I was praying for direction. I was weeping for a message. As the sun was setting, the most beautiful sunset I have ever seen. Just indigo, gold, beautiful colors in the clear sky over the Mediterranean Sea. The light of the sun was dancing in such an incredibly beautiful way upon the waves of the sea. And in that moment I heard a voice. It was a silent voice. But it was the most powerful thing that ever happened to me in my life up to that point. because I knew if I followed what this voice said, I could never turn back and my life would never be the same. It was such a serious crossroads. The voice spoke 3 words. Go to India. I had never met an Indian in my life. I had never eaten Indian food in my life. I had no idea where India was. I didn't have a map and I couldn't afford one. I had nothing. But I was determined to go to India. I went back to the cave. By this time it was dark. There was one little candle, and Gary was sitting in meditation. I said, Gary, something incredible happened to me today. Gary told me something amazing happened to me. I said, what? He said, at sunset I heard a voice. I asked him, what did the voice say? He said, you won't believe me. I said, I really think I will believe you. He said, no, you won't believe me. This is too incredible. I said, well, just tell me. I will believe you. He said, it spoke 3 words. What? We were on the stone floor. I slid closer to him. He said, I heard this voice say, go to Israel. I couldn't believe it. I said, where? He said, I told you you wouldn't believe me. I said, no, I believe you. I just didn't hear you properly. Where? He said, Israel. We should go to Israel together. I said, Gary, he told me to go to India. India? There was total silence for 20 minutes. We were both looking out at the stars, dazed and confused about what was going on. And then I turned to Gary and said, at sunrise tomorrow, I'm leaving for India. He said, you can't do that. You have no money. Hitchhiking in Europe is one thing, but hitchhiking through the deserts of the Middle East is dangerous. You're insane. I said, I know. But I'm going. I believe if I just keep hitchhiking in the eastern direction, by God's grace, someday I will arrive in India. And he started to cry, and I started to cry. And at sunrise the next morning, we left each other. And we didn't know if we would ever meet again. Many things happened. Traveling up the coast of Greece, and hitchhiking through Turkey, Istanbul to Ankara to Erzurum, and crossing the border into Iran. Somehow or other, I would meet people who would give me enough money to get a visa for the next country.